When it comes to quintessential gaming icons, Mario is the leader of the pack with an unrivaled back catalog of genre-defining hits, but as hard as it may be to believe, the beloved Nintendo mascot's reputation isn't as untarnished as you'd expect. On this special episode of Innocent Until Proven Guilty, we're going to take a closer look at the supposedly worst Mario games to determine if they're really as bad as they're made out to be. Let's go! Released for the Super Nintendo in the fall of 1994, Mario's Early Years is the trilogy of titles meant to provide a fun and entertaining outlet for young children about to embark on their learning journey. These Software Toolworks productions feature a series of exercises based around the basic educational building blocks, with a kid's voice sample prompting the player to choose certain numbers, letters, and shapes before progressing towards the next screen where the process is repeated from scratch.
Find the 10.
You did well!
You found the 10. Find the 1.
The gameplay, if you can call it that, is the virtual cure for insomnia, and the devs lazily recycled assets in order to make the biggest buck off of the least effort, with the 3 cartridges providing no more than 2 hours of total content to consume. I know I really shouldn't complain since I didn't spend a single shiny cent on any of these Mario oddities, but even by edutainment standards, fun with letters, numbers, and preschool fun are shameful, shallow experiences that can't even be saved by the colorful and appealing Nintendo theme, which is why I rule that the verdict is guilty! Perhaps I'm being a bit harsh on these narrowly targeted titles, and I suppose it's possible that I would have gotten a kick out of these if I'd been the right age when they came out, but the cold hard truth of the matter is that the Early Years trilogy falls short in comparison to previously reviewed entries such as Captain Novolin and Crystal's Ponytail. There are admittedly some small amusing moments, such as the dopey voice that is shared by every member of the supporting cast and the slumbering Luigi sprite, but that's not enough to earn a reprieve and recommendation, and I gladly relegate these bland bores to an uncomfortable spot in the IUPG jail. A Mario game in title only, Mario is missing places the spotlight on the plumber's younger brother for a globe-trotting adventure released for the NES and Super Nintendo in 1993. As with the Early Years trilogy, the publication duties were handled by Software Toolworks, but the development was delegated to 2 studios familiar to IUPG viewers, Radical Entertainment and Software Creations. Personnel differences notwithstanding, the premise is based around the kidnapping and subsequent rescue mission of the Nintendo mascot that entails traveling to a wide variety of exotic locales via the dungeon doors in Bowser's Castle. These tourist destinations are home to 3 culturally and historically important items that have unfortunately been stolen by the Koopa minions, so our objective naturally is to retrieve and return the pilfered property by finding the treacherous thieves and stomping them into oblivion. This is largely a cut-and-dry task thanks to the map and the menu interface, but the latter half of the Good Samaritan routine is a bit more daunting as the station attendants will ask questions related to these treasures to verify their authenticity. In comparing the 2 console iterations, the NES is extremely lenient, only asking a single softball question before handing over the reward, but the Super Nintendo's booth manager is super strict. She expects us to memorize every esoteric tidbit from these elaborate fact sheets, accusing us of being phonies if we make a mistake, and shuts us out in a stone-cold manner that is quite unexpected from someone who looks like Princess Peach. Nevertheless, the tellers are pleased as punch to receive their lost goods and allow Luigi a moment or two for a photo-op memento, and then it's time to schmooze with the locals for the Globulator coordinates and summon Yoshi for the return trip to Bowser's Castle. From here on out, it's a straightforward lather, rinse, and repeat scenario with a few ridiculously easy boss battles tossed in to add spice, before culminating in an anticlimactic conclusion that dispatches the Koopa King in a blink and you'll miss it ending. Adding insult to injury is the fact that the title itself is a bald-faced lie. Mario was right there in the castle the whole time, so he was never really missing. I could rant about how this is blatant false advertising and a class action lawsuit should have been filed for the squandered potential, but I'll admit that the misleading moniker doesn't ruin the overall experience. Setting my childhood rental nostalgia aside, the concept is neat and the presentation is pretty impressive considering this isn't a first-party Nintendo production. With that said though, the repetitive format quickly wears out its welcome, the clunky controls on the NES caused many an annoying blunder, and there were a surprising number of glitches. It may not be as dull as the earlier trilogy, but that's not saying much when the entertainment value is still only a few notches above reading an actual textbook, so that's why I rule that the verdict is guilty. Nostalgia is a powerful drug. It can make us feel like a kid again and provide a warm fuzzy fondness for our favorite media, but there's one thing it can't do, and that's salvaging this educational flop. Mario is Missing had such promising potential, and it could have dethroned Carmen Sandiego as the ruler of the genre, so it's a shame that the finished product turned out to be a lackluster dud, and it gives me no pleasure to send this erroneously named offender to the slammer. Yin to Mario is Missing's yang, Mario's Time Machine was similarly designed for the NES and Super Nintendo, hitting the market in December 1993 and June 1994 respectively. In keeping with the precedent established by its older Software Toolworks sibling, the plot of Mario's Time Machine remains largely unchanged between the two versions and basically boils down to Bowser abusing the titular device to greedily line his pockets by stealing irreplaceable historic artifacts. Our hero has to return these priceless relics to their proper eras, and the manner by which he does so drastically differs from one version to the next. The Mindscape developed Super Nintendo entry has the items and itinerary being instantly available from the start, but the Radical Entertainment NES effort involves the completion of classic arcade-style levels to receive the artifacts without a single useful strand of accompanying data to determine our next course of action. From here, the arcs of deviation continue as we have to enter the adjacent warp pipe on the NES to bring up the instrument panel, while pressing L performs the same task on the Super Nintendo. The NES release simply requires finding the correct drop spot and pressing A, but the 16-bit iteration goes over and above by having the plumber surf into a literal time vortex and fill out an extensive questionnaire. The questionnaire provides all of the aforementioned data that's sorely missing on the NES, and it's the pivotal pillar for capturing the attention of Gandhi, Da Vinci, and the rest of the famous figures, so the first step in our chronology-spanning journey is to complete it with the assistance of the nearby townsfolk. These gossiping civilians provide the majority of the answers we seek, in addition to a few comical one-liners, and this paves the way for the historical person of interest to finally accept their missing items. With this mission accomplished, the two iterations continue to play out in their respective styles until their paths diverge entirely at the climax, with the NES culminating in a generic Bowser battle and the Super Nintendo capping off with one out of 3 possible endings. It should be perfectly obvious by now that Mario's time machine far exceeds its older sibling. Anyone who recognizes what this is should realize that I'm a sucker for time-traveling fiction, and Mindscape did a pretty good job on their interpretation of this tried and true format. The attention to detail is respectable, and the presentation really sells the vibe of each era, while the writing splashes in occasional humorous bits to add levity into the mix. However, as pleasant as the overall package is, there are a few flaws that detract from the fun. The Super Nintendo version is devoid of any kind of action, while the NES release is too basic, the box art is a complete lie, and the often anachronistic behavior of the historical figures is filled with timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly stuff. In spite of all that though, Mario's Time Machine remains one of the better examples of what the edutainment genre had to offer, and Software Tooled work more than made up for their previous disappointment, so that's why I ruled that the verdict is innocent. Yes, I'm going innocent on this one, and I'm honestly as shocked about that as I'm sure all of you are. Minus a few cool features, I really wasn't impressed with the NES version, so I was prepared to issue a fittingly strict sentence, but then I popped the Super Nintendo cartridge into my console and my jaw just about hit the floor. Credit where it's due, Mindscape redeemed their infamous reputation with a genuinely enjoyable edutational tie-in, and this is one trip through time that's definitely worth seeking out. After receiving countless requests, the time has finally arrived for IUPG to tackle something CDI related, and what better way to start than with the notorious Hotel Mario? Developed by the creatively named Fantasy Factory and published by Philips, Hotel Mario, along with the equally egregious Zelda trilogy, was the result of the abandoned partnership between the aforementioned electronics manufacturer and Nintendo. It kicks off with a ridiculous fourth wall breaking cutscene that has the brothers' dinner plans being spoiled by a note from Bowser, informing them that the Fiend is holding the princess hostage in one of his 7 hotels.
Gee, look! It's from Bowser. Dear pesky plumbers, the Koopalings and I have taken over the Mushroom Kingdom. The princess is now a permanent guest at one of my 7 Koopa hotels. I dare you to find her if you can. We gotta find the princess. And you gotta help us. If you need instructions on how to get through the hotels, check out the enclosed instruction book.
What follows is a puzzle platformer with one straightforward objective: close all of the doors before the time limit runs out to transition to the next area. Sounds simple enough in theory, especially since all it takes is the press of the 2 button to complete this task, but the Scourge of the Mushroom Kingdom ensured that Peach's rescuer would have his work cut out for him by filling the halls of his rental spaces with enemies and obstacles galore. Mario can jump on these foes in his traditional fashion or hide from them by ducking into the adjacent rooms, but they'll quickly respawn and reset our progress unless we cut them off at the pass. These tenacious terrors are a constant thorn in the protagonist's side as he rises through the titular establishments, and it takes everything and the kitchen sink to survive these brutal door-filled segments in one piece. There are elevators located amidst the scenery, which greatly increase the efficiency in traveling between floors, but they come with a catch. Pressing up on the D-pad activates the elevators, and the 1 button manually overrides the flow of the unit from within, but this control is periodically snatched from our grasp and we're thrown for a topsy-turvy loop when the intended direction switches without a moment's notice. Needless to say, Hotel Mario puts the player through their own personal hell, and I frequently questioned my sanity along the duration of my recording session, but I was able to plow past the 9 stages through sheer determination and proceed to engage in an epic showdown with the Koopa Kids. As with the proper Mario titles, the Koopa Kids fight the plumber once per world, only this time they incorporate the door mechanic and dish out an array of devastating attacks, but all it takes is a little patience and a calm demeanor to strike these annoying brats down for the count and receive a cutscene reward.
Get ready to catch her. She's not coming down. She's up there. hard to see through those clouds. I hope we can get rid of them. Get the hint?
The victory in the woods leads to a variety of environmental settings, from the cliched ice-covered terrain to a creepy castle, and the difficulty multiplies with each passing level. In spite of the gargantuan odds, I was somehow able to make it to the penultimate hotel, and this is where I confronted one of the greatest challenges I've ever faced in my cumulative gaming experience. For no reason whatsoever, Hotel Mario decided to throw the rulebook out the window at the groan-inducing Blitz charlatan and multiply the standard format so that there are now 2 sections per area, and this slight tweak frustrated me so much that I had to toss in the towel. Unlike most people who quit out of disgust, I was disappointed to stop because I enjoyed a lot of what Hotel Mario had to offer. The gameplay is repetitive but satisfying, with hilariously stupid cutscenes and an extreme challenge sure to please even the most hardcore of retro enthusiasts. On the other hand, that same challenge is way too imbalanced, and there are hit detection issues that made me cry out in anger over the utter unfair BS. Factor in the lackluster presentation and the handicap of being forced to use one of the sorriest excuses for a controller, and you have a recipe for a Hindenburg scale disaster, which is why I rule that the verdict is guilty. Hotel Mario has a lot of problems, and it undoubtedly deserves every ounce of scorn it's received and then some, but I honestly don't think it's the worst game in the franchise. If I was held at gunpoint and made to revisit any of the previous guilty parties in this video, this would easily be my choice. I'll take anger over boredom any day of the week, but I know that I'm probably in the minority on that, so I'll only recommend watching a montage of all the cutscenes on YouTube. They're the textbook definition of so bad it's good, which is more than could be said for this Phillips aberration, so I have no choice but to deliver the strictest possible sentence: life without parole. Super Mario Bros. 2 originated as a Famicom Disk System exclusive on June 3, 1986, but it rose to notoriety in the US when it was included as part of the All-Stars compilation under the new title The Lost Levels on July 14, 1993. On a surface glance, the Japanese sequel to the mega blockbuster platformer feels like a retread of its iconic predecessor. The controls and presentation remain the same, and the plumber encounters the enemy types familiar to us from youth, but digging a little deeper reveals the roots of what would later become popularized in the Kaizo series. Miyamoto-san apparently set out to create the hardest game in existence up to that point, and he did so by tweaking a number of the signature elements, the first of which is immediately evident in the introductory demo. The traditional mushrooms are now joined by a bizarro insta-killing counterpart, and Miyamoto's decision to flip the troll switch into overdrive meant that there were a whole new supply of pitfalls to overcome. To put it another way, the Lost Levels makes the original Super Mario Bros. Look like Bugs Bunny Birthday Blowout, as there are now tricky jumps that test the true mettle of any side-scrolling junkie, as well as stage hazards that complicate even the simplest of actions. Want to ascend the top of those stairs? Here's some wind to blow you away. Think you have clear access for a jump? Too bad, here's an invisible block. Tired of a section and want to warp to a later one? Get good, you scrub, or else go back to World 1. These are but a few examples of the seemingly endless amount of blister-inducing hurdles, and failure to overcome them will still result in being sent back to the beginning of a section, so anyone who dares to take on the Lost Levels better bring everything they have or else suffer a string of humiliating defeats. Luckily, we're given a leg up in facing this Herculean feat with the monumental inclusion of Luigi for the first time ever as a unique playable character. Up until this point, Luigi was a mere palette swap for his older brother, but the Japanese SMB2 gave him attributes such as an enhanced leaping ability and added momentum that come in handy for crossing the aforementioned hurdles, though they also increase the risk of slippery death, so be prepared to adjust your playing style accordingly. Regardless of which sibling is selected, the standard 4-stage format is preserved, with Bowser's castle closing out each of the worlds, and as to be expected, they tip the scale into Nigel Tufnell territory. Without going into graphic detail, the air in my game room was blue with profanity during my recording session from the onslaught I had to endure, but by Miyamoto's mercy, I survived the ordeal and dropped Bowser into the lava for a glorious victory, unlocking the bonus 9th world as a reward for my troubles. From what I've gathered, the Infinite Continues feature ceases to function at this point, as I was given a final goodbye message upon exhausting my few remaining lives, but the Super Nintendo version kept them in check, so I was able to proceed to the now easily accessible letter-based worlds before calling it quits. The Super Nintendo version was actually much more forgiving than its source material, as it allows the player to pick right up from where they left off, and I was able to slash my completion time from 12 hours on the Famicom to a little over 3 on the SNES, in the process gaining more of an appreciation for this controversial entry in the Mario catalog. It's undeniably a derivative retread that brings very little fresh content to the table, with everything but the groundbreaking Luigi edition being chalked up to nothing more than aesthetic alterations. Nintendo of America felt so negatively about this game that they decided to scrap it in favor of a reskinned Doki Doki Panic, a change which Miyamoto himself has come out in recent years as preferring over his own creation, so that's some pretty damning evidence against the lost levels. As far as I'm concerned, I've made it no secret that I agree with Miyamoto, and I consider the US release to be the true Mario 2, but that doesn't mean I harbor any ill will towards the originally intended sequel. At its core, it's still a proper Mario game, and while there may be a hell of a difficulty boost and a few cheap obstacles here and there, the overall challenge is frustrating but fun. The lost levels may not gain any points for originality, but it was single-handedly responsible for the creation of its US counterpart, and for that I'll be eternally grateful for its existence, which is why I rule that the verdict is innocent. Derivative nature aside, the Lost Levels does not belong in the same category as the rest of the worst Mario games, since its execution is fully formed and competent from beginning to end. The difficulty is occasionally a bit too extreme, and that is a significant contributor to its derision from the fans, but that to me doesn't sour the overall experience, and I'd strongly suggest seeking out the All-Stars port to try out this legendary adventure in its ultimate form. Anyway, now that I've wrapped up this Mario Marathon session, there's another IUPG case on the docket that's calling my name. Be sure to come back for that and leave any requests in the comments or at my social media accounts, but until then, court is now adjourned. Thanks for watching. If you liked what you saw and you want to see more, the boxes on the screen right now will lead to some more of my videos, and if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel by clicking on my avatar in the bottom right hand corner. Thanks again.